Imagine a crisis of this so widespread, so deadly, it's touching every single state in America. But its roots, they stretch way beyond our borders through these complex international networks, starting in chemical factories, maybe in Asia, reaching right into the heart of South America.
Yeah, and the human cost is just, well, devastating. We're talking about an American citizen dying from a drug overdose every 7 minutes.
Every 7 minutes. That's what FBI Director Kash Patel called wildly out of control and unacceptable back in March 2025. He framed it as a true national emergency.
Exactly. And that's the core of what we're digging into today. This whole story brings together the global fentanyl crisis, these, escalating tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela, and the shadowy, really formidable power of Mexican drug cartels.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the threads connecting these things, they seem separate at first glance, but they're actually reshaping how we even think about national security.
That's the key insight, right? How these threads weave together. It's this complex tapestry. And it forces us to redefine what national security even means in this context. We're not just talking about, standard criminal groups anymore.
No, these are entities that challenge state power, they twist international diplomacy.
And their economic and military might. It's forcing a complete rethink of traditional power dynamics. The big takeaway for you listening is that this isn't just a drug problem, it's deeper. It's a reordering of influence in the Americas.
Creating this critical, multidimensional security challenge. So our mission today.
Our mission is basically to give you a shortcut, to help you get truly well-informed on this urgent, often misunderstood issue. We want to help you connect the dots between things that might seem worlds apart.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The fentanyl crisis itself. The sheer scale is, well, hard to comprehend. An invisible killer, claiming a life every 7 minutes.
And when Director Patel uses language like, every state is a border state, he means this isn't just a problem for Texas or Arizona, it's everywhere. It demands a robust law enforcement response, coast to coast, heartland included.
It transcends borders, physically and metaphorically.
And the seizure numbers back up that urgency. Just think, in only 3 months of 2025, the FBI grabbed 840 kilograms of fentanyl.
840 kilos.
It's almost impossible to picture. That's enough, potentially, to kill hundreds of millions of people. It really highlights the lethality we're dealing with.
And it shows what law enforcement is up against. They're not just making routine busts.
Definitely not. Look at that big operation in April 2025 down at Port Everglades in Florida. The FBI and partners seized over 48,000 pounds of various illicit narcotics, including fentanyl. The total value, over $500 million.
Wow, $500 million.
And the key implication here, the way the FBI talks about it, they're prioritizing this alongside fighting child predators and terrorists. That's a major shift.
So federal law enforcement sees fentanyl not just as a public health crisis, which it obviously is, but as a direct national security threat.
Precisely. Requiring this full spectrum response, it changes the game.
Okay, so the scale is terrifyingly clear. But where are these drugs? And maybe more importantly, the chemicals needed to make them, the precursors. Where are they coming from? Because Director Patel has some very strong views on this.
He does. He points the finger squarely at China, specifically the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP.
He called them the root of the problem. I remember seeing that quote from June 2025.
Exactly. So where's the root of the problem? The CCP.
And his proposed solution is just as direct. Shut down the precursor chemical companies operating in mainland China. Period.
But he didn't stop there, did he? He also focused heavily on the northern border with Canada.
Right. In May 2025, he was on Fox News claiming significant amounts of fentanyl are coming in from Canada, especially, he argued, because the southern border was getting tighter. That's when he told Canada to get to SEPN, right, to stop the flow of fentanyl, and, he alleged, suspected terrorists too.
That's the quote. He even suggested this collaboration between adversaries like China and Russia, working with criminal groups to exploit that northern route, maybe even producing fentanyl inside Canada.
Okay, but here's where it gets complicated again. What does the actual data show?
Well, that's the fascinating part. Data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, for April 2025 tells a very different story. They recorded seizing just 6.3 kilograms of fentanyl at the northern border.
Only 6.3 kilos, compared to what, from Mexico?
Compared to nearly 300 kilograms seized coming from Mexico in that same month.
Whoa. That's a massive discrepancy. It really challenges that narrative about Canada being a primary entry point.
It strongly contradicts it. It definitely raises questions about the basis for those claims, focusing so heavily on the North.
Yeah, it highlights how we need to look beyond the simple narratives. And speaking of nuance, let's talk more about China's role. Patel says it's deliberate targeting by the CCP. Is there solid proof of that?
That's the key question. While China is undeniably maybe the principal global supplier of those precursor chemicals needed to make fentanyl, there isn't actually any conclusive declassified U.S. intelligence proving a deliberate intent by the CCP to target the U.S. with these chemicals.
So the chemicals are coming from China, but the why is murky.
Exactly. And you even have Chinese officials pushing back hard. In January 2024, Yu Haibin from China's Narcotics Control Bureau told NBC News quite bluntly that the U.S. fentanyl crisis is not manufactured by China. Rather, its roots lie within the United States itself.
So he's pointing back at us, saying it's about demand here.
He put the emphasis squarely on U.S. domestic demand and societal issues. And he also highlighted China's cooperation efforts, like their 2019 ban on exporting finished fentanyl and reporting drug incidents to the INCB, the UN's drug control body.
Okay, but what about the U.S. perspective? Are we seeing any cooperation?
Well, interestingly, yes, according to some. Senior Biden administration officials, speaking anonymously in late 2023 and early 2024, mentioned significant breakthroughs in disrupting precursor supplies after they restarted talks with China in November 2023.
So diplomacy might actually be working, at least to some extent.
They seemed cautiously optimistic, even noting a decline in fentanyl seizures after those talks. It suggests that engagement can yield results, and it points towards perhaps a more market-driven, illicit network. It's not necessarily a state-run chemical attack.
What do independent experts say?
People like Vanda Felbab-Brown at Brookings, who's a real expert here, she reinforces this complexity. In a podcast last September, she acknowledged China as the principal supplier of precursors, but she stressed that the shift towards sending precursors to Mexico for synthesis, especially after China's 2019 ban, was likely driven more by profit and the sheer adaptability of criminal groups rather than some grand state policy.
So the cartels adapted when China banned fentanyl itself. They just switched to making it from precursors.
Precisely. And the DEA consistently reports that Mexico remains the primary pipeline for finished fentanyl reaching the U.S., with cartels synthesizing the drug in these clandestine labs using those precursors, which often originate in China, before smuggling it north.
Okay, so if the administration sees potential for cooperation, and China points to U.S. demand, and experts highlight profit motives, does this mean focusing solely on stopping the supply is, well, missing half the equation?
I think that's a fair assessment. Interdicting the supply is absolutely critical. You can't stop doing that. But it's clear we can't ignore the other side of the coin.
To demand side.
Exactly. The fentanyl crisis, at its heart, is fueled by addiction. It's fueled by economic despair, social instability, and often a real lack of access to decent healthcare and support.
So if we're really going to make a difference, we have to tackle those underlying human issues.
Absolutely. It has to be a two-pronged approach. And on the demand side, one of the most powerful tools we have, backed by solid evidence, is expanding medication-assisted treatment, or MAT.
Matt, can you unpack that a bit? It's not just giving people other drugs, right?
No, definitely not. MAT combines specific medications like methadone, buprenorphine, or naltrexone with crucial counseling and behavioral therapies. It's a whole patient approach, and the results. A 2023 NIH study showed it reduces overdose deaths by 50 to 70%.
50 to 70% reduction in deaths. That's huge. So why isn't everyone getting it?
That's the tragic irony. According to SAM-HSA data from 2024, only about 20% of the 2.7 million Americans with opioid use disorder, or OUD, actually receive MAT. Access is a massive barrier.
Why? What are the barriers?
A big one is provider availability. Only about 1 in 4 U.S. doctors are even certified to prescribe buprenorphine, one of the key MAT drugs. Plus, you have outdated regulations, insurance hurdles, stigma. It's a whole tangle.
So we need more funding, more trained doctors, and less red tape.
Desperately. We need to boost federal funding for MAT programs, train way more healthcare providers, and systematically dismantle those barriers that stop people from getting life-saving treatment.
Okay, and what about immediate life-saving measures? Like naloxone, that's the overdose reversal drug, right?
Exactly. Naloxone, often known by the brand name Narcan, is an absolute game changer. It can literally reverse an opioid overdose within minutes.
And we're getting it out there more.
Progress is being made. The CDC reported over 1 million doses distributed in 2024, But the goal really needs to be closer to 2 million annually, maybe more.
How do we get there?
By making it free, making it available over the counter without a prescription, especially saturating high-risk areas, states like Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, that have been hit incredibly hard. And just training more people, not just first responders, but family members, librarians, teachers, anyone on how to use it. It saves lives, plain and simple.
Beyond these immediate responses, what about long-term innovation? Are we investing enough in new treatments or approaches?
That's another critical piece. We need sustained investment in research. Imagine allocating, say, $500 million a year. That could fund NIH research into longer-acting medications, reducing the burden of daily dosing.
Or even things like vaccines. I've heard whispers about that.
Exactly. Vaccines designed to block fentanyl's effects are actually in early trials as of 2024. It's groundbreaking stuff. Plus, funding could spur development of digital recovery tools apps offering remote counseling, peer support networks, things like that.
But as you said earlier, we can't just treat the symptoms. We have to address the root causes, the social drivers, like homelessness.
Absolutely crucial. Consider housing first programs. The concept is simple. Provide stable, permanent housing first without preconditions like sobriety. Give people that foundation.
And does it work for substance use?
The evidence suggests it does. A 2023 HUD study found that 60% of participants in these programs actually reduced their substance use once they had stable housing.
So stability helps recovery.
It's fundamental. Scaling up federal funding to build more permanent supportive housing, maybe aiming for an ambitious goal like housing 1 million vulnerable people by 2030, could be transformative.
Makes sense. Lack of shelter makes everything else harder. What about mental health? There's often a strong link there, right?
A huge link. The data is stark. A 2024 NIH report showed that 50%, half of people with opioid use disorder, also struggle with co-occurring mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, or PTSD.
So treatment has to address both.
It has to. We need to expand community mental health centers, really integrate trauma-informed care into all treatment programs, and leverage telehealth to reach people in rural or underserved areas. Maybe aim to double the number of federally funded centers by, say, 2028.
And the economic piece, joblessness, poverty.
Directly correlated. A 2024 HUD study noted 30% of homeless individuals report substance abuse. Poverty and lack of opportunity breed despair, which can fuel addiction.
So job training, economic support.
Yes. Funding vocational programs specifically for people in recovery, maybe subsidizing wages initially, creating real job opportunities in marginalized communities. Training 500,000 people annually could offer a pathway out of that cycle.
Okay, those are concrete steps. But you also mentioned exploring more systemic interventions. This is where ideas like universal basic income, UBI, come up. That sounds bold.
It is bold, and it's definitely controversial. The idea being floated is a federal pilot program. Imagine giving $1,000 a month to maybe 1 million low-income or at-risk adults.
Right, based on what evidence?
It builds on findings from smaller pilots, like one in Stockton, California, back in 2023, which showed improvements in participants' mental health and better job prospects. The thinking is that providing a basic safety net could reduce the sheer economic desperation that sometimes drives drug use.
But the challenges must be huge.
Immense. First, the cost. Even for just 1 million people, you're talking $12 billion a year. Politically, there's significant resistance to broad, unconditional cash transfers.
And does it actually reduce addiction? Is there proof?
That's the big unknown. Its direct, long-term impact on addiction rates hasn't been proven conclusively at a large scale. We just don't have those large-scale studies yet directly linking UBI to widespread declines in substance use across diverse groups.
So UBI is maybe a potential tool, but unproven and costly.
Exactly. It's an intriguing idea for tackling poverty, which is a driver, but its direct effect on addiction is still theoretical. Still, it fits into that broader picture of needing systemic change, alongside things like better prevention education in schools. Only 10% have comprehensive programs now.
And tighter prescription oversight. PDMPs.
Right, prescription drug monitoring programs, aiming to cut opioid scripts by maybe 25%. Plus expanding harm reduction things like safe injection sites, widely available fentanyl test strips, and fostering more public-private partnerships. It's a multi-layered approach.
Got it. Now, shifting back towards the supply side for a moment, what about using technology to get ahead of the curve? I've heard talk about using blockchain to track precursor chemicals. How would that even work?
It's a really innovative concept, yeah. Think of it like a super secure shared digital ledger, the same tech behind Bitcoin. The idea is to track these precursor chemicals right from their point of origin, maybe a factory in China.
And follow them through every step.
Every transit point, every handler, right to the final legitimate destination. Each step is recorded on this blockchain: chemical type, quantity, batch number, date, location, who's involved, all verified with digital signatures.
So it's tamper-proof. You can trust the record.
That's the core idea. It's decentralized and immutable. And crucially, any precursor chemical shipment that isn't on this blockchain or has gaps in its chain of custody would be immediately flagged as suspicious. It triggers alarms.
The potential benefits sound huge. Transparency, traceability.
Exactly. You could potentially trace a batch from that Chinese factory right to a specific cartel lab in Mexico if it gets diverted. That offers incredible transparency. It acts as a deterrent because illicit actors can't easily hide. And it could foster amazing collaboration between governments sharing this verified data.
So this could really choke off the supply at the source, stop cartels from even making the fentanyl.
Potentially, yes. It could revolutionize how we control precursors, but, and it's a big but, the challenges are just as immense.
Like what? Getting everyone to agree.
Global cooperation is number one. You need buy-in from major source countries like China, who might resist that level of transparency due to sovereignty concerns or wanting to protect their chemical industries.
And these chemicals have legal uses too, right?
That's the dual-use problem. Many precursors are used in perfectly legal industries, making pharmaceuticals, plastics, even aspirin or nail polish remover. Regulating them 100% without crippling legitimate businesses is incredibly difficult.
What else? Cost? Scale?
Huge cost and scale. Implementing this globally requires massive infrastructure, training, ongoing maintenance, and then you have the cartels themselves.
They just find a workaround.
They're incredibly adaptive. They could synthesize new unlisted precursors or simply find new smuggling routes and methods to bypass the system entirely, operating further in the shadows.
Plus privacy concerns.
Big time. Putting all that sensitive commercial and security data on one shared platform raises major privacy and data security questions. So, as of mid-2025, there's no comprehensive global blockchain system for this. It's been piloted for legitimate pharma supply chains, showing it's technically feasible in controlled settings, but scaling it globally against adaptive criminals, that's a whole different challenge. It really begs the question, how do you get that unprecedented international cooperation needed, navigating all the politics and economics, to make it work against groups designed to evade detection?
That's a massive question, and it leads us perfectly into our next major piece, Venezuela, a country whose own crisis and complex relationship with the U.S. have become deeply tangled up in this whole web.
Absolutely. The U.S.-Venezuela relationship, it's been complicated for centuries, really. The U.S. recognized Venezuela's independence way back in 1835.
And oil changed everything, right? Early 20th century.
Oil cemented Venezuela as a top crude supplier to the U.S. You'd think that would build stability, mutual benefit. But nope. It's mostly been a story of mistrust and conflict.
Why so much mistrust?
A lot of it dates back to the Cold War. U.S. interventions across Latin America, think Chile in '73, Guatemala in '54, created deep skepticism in Caracas about Washington's motives. It fed this narrative of U.S. imperialism.
And then Hugo Chavez came along.
Right, the Chavez era, 1999 to 2013. His Bolivarian revolution involved nationalizing that oil wealth, redistributing land, but also forging alliances with Cuba, Iran, Russia, and pushing a very strong anti-U.S. stance globally.
He called George W. Bush the devil at the UN, I remember that.
Famously. And what really cemented the mistrust from Venezuela's side was the perception, later confirmed by declassified CIA cables, of tacit U.S. approval for the failed coup attempt against Chavez in 2002.
So even with oil money flowing, the rot was setting in.
Yeah, despite the oil wealth, this era saw corruption and mismanagement really grow, hollowing out institutions, which unfortunately paved the way for the collapse we've seen since.
And under Nicolas Maduro, who took over after Chavez died in 2013, it's gone from bad to catastrophic.
Utter catastrophe. Hyperinflation that made currency worthless, crippling food and medicine shortages, and this unbelievable mass emigration. Over 8 million people have fled since 2015. It's the largest displacement crisis in Latin American history.
The impact on neighboring countries must be immense.
Unbearable strain. Meanwhile, the U.S. response has been cycles of sanctions. Obama started targeting officials in 2015. Trump dramatically escalated in 2019, recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido, froze oil exports, cut diplomatic ties.
And Biden. He eased them briefly.
Briefly, yeah, in 2023-24, trying to encourage talks. But after Maduro's July 2024 re-election, which was widely seen as fraudulent, Biden reimposed sanctions with full force. Maduro, for his part, has doubled down on alliances with U.S. rivals. Russia provides military support, China offers loans and infrastructure deals, Iran helps with fuel swaps to bypass sanctions.
And he frames U.S. actions as
Economic terrorism,
Yep.
imperialist aggression. He plays that anti-Western card very effectively, both domestically and regionally.
So where are we right now as of late August 2025? It feels like a real flashpoint.
It absolutely is. Maduro's 2024 re-election, where opponents were barred and irregularities were rampant, was condemned globally. OAS, EU, many others called it fraudulent. The U.S. still recognizes the opposition-led 2015 National Assembly as the last legitimate democratic body.
And Washington raised the bounty on Maduro.
To $50 million, on August 7th. And crucially, it's for narco-terrorism charges. That explicitly links him to drug trafficking in the eyes of the U.S. government.
Which explains the military movements, the warships.
It seems connected. The U.S. deployed 3 warships, including destroyers, plus 2,000 Marines near Venezuelan waters, the stated reason, counter-narcotics missions. But there's talk of more ships potentially coming.
How's Maduro responding to that?
Defiantly. Mobilized 4 million militia members, activated air defenses, denounced it all as imperialist aggression aimed at regime change. It's classic rallying the base against an external threat.
But the internal situation remains grim. Human rights.
Dire. Rights groups count over 1,000 political prisoners as of March 2025. There have been dozens of protester killings since that disputed election. The UN Secretary General Guterres has warned of a potential catastrophic confrontation. It's incredibly tense.
How is the rest of the world, particularly Latin America, reacting to this standoff?
Deeply divided. That's the problem. In Latin America, you have left-leaning governments, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, criticizing U.S. sanctions as harmful, unilateral, coercive measures, while still urging dialogue.
And the right-leaning governments.
Countries like Argentina, Chile, Uruguay tend to condemn Maduro's authoritarianism and align more with U.S. pressure tactics. But everyone is struggling with the fallout from those 8 million Venezuelan migrants, straining resources and fueling political tension across the continent.
What about globally?
Similar split. The UN, EU, OAS condemn the repression. Over 50 countries recognize the opposition assembly. But Russia, China, Iran, they provide Maduro with crucial economic lifelines, weapons, and diplomatic cover, blocking critical resolutions at the UN Security Council. They see Venezuela as a strategic ally in the region.
So neutral players are trying to mediate.
Countries like Canada, Norway, the Vatican keep pushing for talks, but the geopolitical divide is stark, and the UN just keeps calling it Latin America's largest humanitarian crisis, with poverty over 80%. It's a mess with no easy answers.
Okay, let's connect this back explicitly to the cartels.
Yeah.
The U.S. isn't just accusing Maduro of being authoritarian, they're accusing him of running a drug state.
That's the core of the narco-terrorism charge. Washington accuses Maduro and his inner circle generals, officials, of running the so-called Cartel of the Suns.
The Cartel of the Suns, what is that exactly?
It's alleged to be a network within the Venezuelan military itself, deeply involved in facilitating large-scale cocaine trafficking. The accusation is they work directly with Mexico's Sinaloa cartel and also with Venezuela's own notorious Tren de Aragua gang, which has spread its criminal network across multiple South American countries.
And the U.S. has backed this up with sanctions.
Yeah, the Treasury Department has sanctioned dozens of Venezuelan officials, citing billions in illicit proceeds specifically from these alleged narco-trafficking activities.
And remember, the U.S. has designated cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs. How does that play into this?
That's a crucial piece of context. That FTO designation, mainly done under Trump, while controversial because it equates profit-driven drug traffickers with ideological terrorists, provides a potential legal basis for the U.S. to take military action against cartels, even across borders, under the banner of counter-terrorism or counter-narcotics.
So critics worry the counter-narcotics mission near Venezuela could be a pretext.
Exactly. Critics warn it could be a convenient pretext for regime change rather than purely about stopping drugs. This whole situation exemplifies the narco-state phenomenon.
Where the lines blur between the state and organized crime.
Completely blur. It's not just about corrupt officials taking bribes, it's when the state itself becomes deeply intertwined with or even directs criminal enterprises. The deeper insight here isn't just the corruption, it's how this phenomenon corrodes the entire social contract. Citizens lose faith in justice, in institutions. It creates this pervasive impunity that's incredibly hard to reverse, far harder than any military intervention can fix. It paralyzes legitimate governance.
That idea of a narco-state is genuinely chilling. And it sets us up perfectly to talk about the Mexican cartels themselves. Because, as you said, these aren't just gangs, they've evolved dramatically.
Dramatically, from relatively small marijuana and opium smugglers back in the 70s and 80s.
To these transnational powerhouses we see today, how did that happen? What were the key moments?
A big turning point was the 1990s. When Colombia's powerful Medellin and Cali cartels were dismantled, it created this huge power vacuum in the cocaine trade.
And Mexican groups stepped in.
They stepped right in. The primary trafficking routes shifted north, making Mexico the essential bridge for cocaine heading to the massive U.S. market. They became indispensable middlemen.
And then came NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, in 1994. How did that affect things?
Paradoxically, it was a massive, albeit unintentional, boost for the cartels. NAFTA dramatically increased the volume of legitimate trade crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, millions more trucks, trains, goods.
Making it easier to hide drugs.
Infinitely easier. It was like the haystack got 10 times bigger overnight, making the needle much harder to find. It gave them unprecedented logistical advantages, reduced their risks, and allowed them to scale up their operations enormously, hiding illicit goods within the flood of legal commerce.
So, a trade deal designed for economic benefit accidentally supercharged the cartels.
Yeah.
Grim irony. And then Mexico launched its own drug war in 2006. Did that work?
Well, the results were complex and often devastatingly counterproductive. The strategy often focused on taking out the top leaders, the kingpins, like El Chapo Guzman.
The idea being cut off the head of the snake.
Right, but instead of killing the snake, it often caused it to shatter into hundreds of pieces. Removing a powerful leader didn't eliminate the cartel. It often led to violent fragmentation.
Creating more violence, not less.
Exactly. Over 200 splinter groups emerged, all fighting brutally for territory and control. It created this incredibly violent, chaotic mosaic across Mexico, actually increasing the bloodshed in many areas.
So who are the dominant players in this fragmented, violent landscape today?
It's still dominated by a couple of giants. The Sinaloa cartel, despite internal fighting you hear about Los Chapitos, El Chapo's sons, versus the faction loyal to El Mayo Zambada, especially after his reported arrest in 2024, it remains arguably the largest and most resilient.
Why so resilient?
Its decentralized structure. It operates more like a federation or a franchise, allowing different cells to operate semi-independently. This makes it incredibly adaptive and able to survive leadership losses.
But they have a major rival now.
Oh, yes. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the CJNG, led by the notorious Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera. They've risen incredibly fast, known for their extreme brutality, public torture, beheadings, using social media for propaganda.
And they're expanding rapidly.
Aggressively. Many analysts believe the CJNG is poised to surpass Sinaloa in global reach and influence. They're a terrifying force.
Are there other significant groups we should know about?
Definitely. The Gulf Cartel, though fragmented, still controls key smuggling corridors along the U.S. border in the northeast. And remnants of Los Zetas, sometimes called the Northeast Cartel, known for their military background, have diversified heavily into extortion, kidnapping, fuel theft. And don't forget the Venezuelan group, Aragua.
They're operating in Mexico, too.
They've become a transnational player, acting as a bridge between South American producers and Mexican groups, involved in both drug and human smuggling across the continent. They add another layer of complexity.
The sheer power these groups wield is just mind-boggling. We're talking revenues in the tens of billions annually, just from U.S. drug sales. That's like a major corporation.
It is. $18 to $39 billion a year from U.S. wholesale proceeds alone. Comparable to Fortune 500 companies, it forces you to rethink them not just as criminals, but as powerful economic entities.
And their military strength.
Equally alarming, they have thousands of fighters, often armed with military-grade weapons. A lot of those weapons, tragically, are sourced illicitly from the U.S.
So they can outgun local police.
In many regions, yes. Their firepower often surpasses local law enforcement, allowing them to operate with near impunity and control vast territories. We're talking maybe 30 to 40% of Mexico's landmass under some degree of cartel influence.
What does that influence look like on the ground?
In these cartel territories, they often act like a parallel state. They levy taxes on businesses, farmers, even avocado growers. They might run local infrastructure projects, provide basic services where the state is absent, and enforce their own brutal form of order. It's this hybrid criminal governance.
Undermining the actual government.
Profoundly. It erodes legitimacy and leaves citizens trapped between the state and the cartel.
And this isn't just a Mexico problem, is it? Their reach is global.
Truly global. Sinaloa and CJNG operate in over 50 countries across 5 continents. They have complex partnerships everywhere.
Like, who are they working with?
Balkan mafias for European distribution, West African groups for transshipment points, Israeli organized crime for money laundering, and of course those Chinese chemical suppliers for the fentanyl precursors. This vast network is what fuels the fentanyl crisis, killing over 100,000 Americans a year. It shows how interconnected it all is.
And politically, how deep does their influence go? Through corruption.
Endemic corruption is key to their power. They bribe police, judges, governors. Reports even suggest they fund electoral campaigns to install friendly officials. It blurs the lines completely between the criminals and the state.
Which just fuels the violence.
Absolutely. Mexico sees over 30,000 homicides annually, and projections for 2025 suggest it could get worse as CJNG tries to capitalize on Sinaloa's internal struggles. The human toll since 2006, over 200,000 killed in drug-related violence. It's staggering.
And it's not just drugs anymore, right? They've diversified their criminal portfolios.
Massively. Drugs are still core, but they're like criminal conglomerates now. Extortion and kidnapping are huge, demanding piso or floor tax from businesses, farmers, migrants.
And human smuggling.
They dominate the routes from Central America, controlling passage, extracting billions, an estimated $13 billion in 2022 alone. It's horrific exploitation.
What else? Resource theft.
Big time. Tapping state oil pipelines, huachicaleo, illegal logging, devastating forests, controlling mines, especially CJNG in Michoacan, grabbing lucrative iron ore and other minerals.
How do they clean all that money?
Sophisticated money laundering. Shell companies, real estate, increasingly using cryptocurrency, complex trade-based schemes involving import-export businesses. It's a constant cat-and-mouse game for financial investigators.
Plus weapons smuggling, environmental crime. It's almost everything.
Weapons flow south from the U.S., arming them heavily. And yes, environmental crime, deforestation for illicit crops or logging, pollution from clandestine labs or mines is increasingly part of their destructive footprint.
So these vast areas, these cartel territories where the state is weak or absent, where are the main hotspots?
You've got the infamous Golden Triangle parts of Sinaloa, Durango, Chihuahua, the historical heartland for opium and marijuana. Then states like Michoacan, Guerrero, and Colima is consistently Mexico's most violent state, heavily contested, often by CJNG.
What about border regions?
Tamaulipas and Veracruz in the northeast are crucial corridors, historically controlled by the Gulf Cartel and Zetas remnants. Down south, Chiapas is seeing CJNG expanding rapidly along migrant routes, and industrial hubs like Guanajuato and Jalisco are CJNG strongholds.
These aren't just remote areas then?
No, they often control vital economic corridors and border crossings. In these places, they don't just influence, they often govern aspects of daily life, sometimes even running prisons like that notorious Tocorón prison in Venezuela before the military raid in 2023.
Is anywhere in Mexico relatively safe from them?
Some areas, like the Yucatan Peninsula, have maintained lower cartel presence, often attributed to stronger local governance, different economic structures, or perhaps less strategic value for trafficking routes. It shows that context matters.
But this widespread control links back to that narco-state idea, the collusion.
Exactly. It thrives where the state is complicit or simply overwhelmed. We talked about Venezuela, the allegations against Maduro's circle working with FARC dissidents and Mexican cartels.
And Mexico's had its own shocking examples of this collusion at the highest levels.
Absolutely. The conviction in the U.S. of Mexico's former Security Secretary, Genaro Garcia Luna, in 2023 for taking huge bribes from the Sinaloa cartel sent shockwaves. You've also had several former state governors jailed for cartel ties.
It shows how deep the rod can go.
It does, and it's not unique to Mexico. Look at Honduras. Former President Juan Orlando Hernandez extradited to the U.S. in 2022 on drug trafficking charges.
Even the U.S. has history here, right? The Contras?
Yeah, the 1980s legacy of the U.S.-backed Contra rebels in Nicaragua, allegedly financing operations through cocaine smuggling. It illustrates how geopolitics and the drug trade have been uncomfortably intertwined for decades. This whole narco-state phenomenon fundamentally corrodes governance, fuels violence, and makes finding solutions incredibly difficult.
Okay, so given this incredibly complex, dangerous landscape, powerful cartels, state collusion, geopolitical tension, what on earth is the path forward? There must be shared interests for the U.S. and Mexico here.
Oh, absolutely. The shared interests are immense, despite the political friction we sometimes see. For the U.S., it's tackling that fentanyl epidemic killing over 100,000 Americans a year, and managing irregular migration, much of which is influenced or controlled by cartels.
And for Mexico?
For Mexico, it's existential, reducing the horrific violence, over 30,000 homicides annually, reclaiming governance from criminal control, attracting investment that's scared off by instability, and rebuilding public trust in institutions, which is fundamental for democracy.
Plus the massive trade relationship.
Exactly. Over $800 billion in annual bilateral trade is at stake. Both countries have a vital economic interest in stability and security. Cooperation isn't just helpful, it's essential.
So let's talk concrete strategies. How do you best tackle cartels inside Mexico? Strengthening institutions seems key.
Foundational. You have to build corruption-resistant, well-trained police and judicial systems. That means expanding vetting and training programs, maybe based on successful models like Tijuana's focus on community policing and strong internal oversight.
And the courts, justice system.
Comprehensive judicial reform is critical. More funding for training judges and prosecutors, better protection for them because they face enormous risks, and streamlining processes to actually prosecute and convict cartel members effectively. Cases like Garcia Luna show how crucial it is to root out corruption at the top to restore faith. Impunity has to end.
And shifting away from just targeting the kingpins.
Yes, that strategy often backfired, leading to more violence. The focus needs to be on dismantling entire networks.
How do you do that?
Through sophisticated intelligence-led operations, mapping the whole structure, hitting mid-level operatives, seizing stash houses and labs, and, crucially, disrupting their finances.
Following the money.
Always follow the money. They launder billions, maybe $25 billion a year using crypto, shell companies, trade schemes. Choking off that money supply is as important as seizing drugs. And you have to tackle recruitment.
Addressing the root causes. Poverty, lack of opportunity.
Exactly. Cartels recruit hundreds of people every week because for many there are few alternatives. Investing in jobs, education, community programs in marginalized areas offers a path away from crime. It directly competes with cartel recruitment efforts.
What about cutting off their resources? Guns, chemicals.
Critical. Curbing the southbound flow of guns from the U.S., where 70–90% of their firearms originate, is vital. Better precursor regulation, maybe using that blockchain idea eventually, is needed. And continued, intensified raids on drugs, cash, labs, and assets, like the successes seen under Joint Task Force Alpha, hit their operational capacity.
And adapting to their changing tactics. They're not just drug smugglers anymore.
Right. They're into cybercrime, crime as a service, dominating human smuggling routes, controlling legitimate industries like avocados or water. Law enforcement has to adapt, bolstering cybersecurity, using the military strategically in hotspots, but relying more on vetted police for investigations. It requires agility.
So effective U.S.-Mexico cooperation is the linchpin for much of this. What do best practices look like there? How do you build trust?
It starts with strong bilateral frameworks, like the Bicentennial Framework started in 2021, which aims for a more holistic approach than past initiatives like Merida. Expanding joint task forces like JTFA builds practical cooperation and gets results, like that Juarez smuggling ring bust in 2025.
And intelligence sharing needs to be seamless.
Real-time, robust intelligence sharing is the central nervous system. Data on movements, labs, finances flowing between DEA, FBI, IC, and Mexico's military, police, customs. Using tech like drones, forensic accounting, it builds trust, enables targeted strikes. But it requires overcoming past friction, like the diplomatic fallout after the Cienfuegos arrest. Transparency and respecting sovereignty are key.
And acknowledging it's a shared problem. U.S. demand fuels the trade.
That's the core of shared responsibility. The U.S. has to tackle its demand. 108,000 overdose deaths in 2024 is a horrific number. That means funding treatment and prevention here. And in return, supporting Mexico's supply-side efforts, lab busts, extraditions like the 29 liters sent north in 2025.
Mutual accountability.
Exactly. And jointly combating corruption is essential, even if it's sensitive, requiring careful diplomacy and avoiding unilateral actions that undermine trust. Finally, targeting those cross-border flows together, northbound drugs, southbound guns, and cash, through better border security and legislation is crucial.
Okay, zooming out one last time. What are the big policy recommendations for a truly comprehensive approach that ties all this together? Short, medium, long term.
Short term, immediately boost intelligence sharing on fentanyl labs, beef up port and border inspections with better tech and personnel, and seriously crack down on U.S. weapons trafficking southward.
Medium term.
Establish more integrated joint U.S.-Mexico task forces with clear mandates. Support and shield effective anti-corruption units within Mexico. And relentlessly disrupt cartel finances, especially crypto and shell companies.
In the long game.
That's investing in real economic alternatives in those cartel-dominated regions, jobs, education, legitimate businesses, dramatically expanding demand reduction programs here in the U.S., enhancing regional coordination through OAS, UN, Interpol, and deploying advanced tech like AI for tracking logistics networks.
So it's definitely a long game, not just about enforcement.
Absolutely. The key lesson from decades of this is that military force alone often makes things worse, fuels violence, fragments groups. Cooperation has to be smarter. Avoid over-militarization, respect sovereignty, focus equally on justice reform, poverty alleviation, building governance.
Unilateral U.S. military action is off the table.
It would be disastrous. Violates international law, would cause huge backlash from Mexico, likely derail all cooperation. What's needed is a unified hemispheric approach, treating cartels as a shared threat, using a multi-tool strategy: enforcement, diplomacy, development, public health. Rebuilding trust in institutions is as important as dismantling the criminal networks.
Okay, let's try to wrap our heads around this. We've followed fentanyl from Chinese precursors through Mexico's powerful cartel networks right into American communities. We've seen how Venezuela's crisis tangles with these criminal empires, creating this dangerous flashpoint. And we've really dug into how these cartels operate like shadow states, wielding incredible power.
It's a global problem, like you said, but with devastating local consequences, blurring all the old lines around national security.
So the final thought for you listening, what does all this mean? It means the fentanyl crisis isn't just a drug issue. It's a deep-seated hemispheric security challenge, tied into global politics, economic desperation, maybe even the future of democracy in parts of the region.
The solutions clearly aren't simple. They require enforcement, yes, but also smart diplomacy, real economic development, and a hard look at tackling demand here at home. And it leaves us with a really challenging, maybe uncomfortable question. When these lines between organized crime, national security, and global politics become this blurred, when cartel economies are so deeply woven into legitimate trade, are our traditional tools enforcement, diplomacy, even military threats, are they still enough? Or do we, as global citizens, need to fundamentally rethink our entire approach to security and justice in a world where power flows through shadows and across borders like never before? How do we effectively respond without just escalating an already catastrophic situation?
A lot to think about there. The deep dive is all about helping you connect those dots, and we really hope this exploration of the cartel nexus has given you a richer, more nuanced understanding of this incredibly complex and urgent issue.